The object designated SCP-093 is a disk of red stone composite, resembling cinnabar, measuring just over 7 centimeters in diameter. It fits comfortably within a closed palm without abrading the skin. Concentric, circular engravings and symbols of unknown origin are carved across its surface to a uniform depth of half a centimeter, with deeper cuts present at intervals between 1 and 1.5 centimeters. When held by a living individual, the disk changes hue. The colors it takes have not yet been correlated with certainty to any single variable, though current Foundation belief holds that the changes depend upon regrets carried by the holder. SCP-093 is to remain on a mirror at all times and under continuous video surveillance. Admittance to its containment area is to be authorized only with proper recording and subject retrieval procedures already in place. Any attempt to use the object outside of an approved test will be dealt with severely, up to and including termination of the responsible personnel. If the object is removed from a mirror and not held by a person, it will seek out the nearest mirror-like surface. Observation indicates that the disk rolls in the largest possible circle available to it, accelerating to phenomenal speed by a mechanism that is currently unknown. Should any obstacle stand between the disk and the nearest reflective surface, it will use this accumulated momentum to punch through that obstacle and continue on its course at velocity. It stops only when contact with a mirror-like surface is achieved. Despite tremendous impact velocities recorded during testing, no damage is dealt to the disk itself, nor to the mirror it ultimately strikes. The records that would clarify the nature of the object's discovery or its presence within the Foundation do not exist. The recovered original documentation that follows constitutes the only known prior account of its behavior, and the test series that succeeds it represents the entirety of current operational knowledge. The original recovered file places the object on the shore of the Red Sea on the 30th of January, 1968. At the time of recovery, it was described as emitting a low sigh and a dim blue gleam. Its color has since shifted, settling into an orange-tinged red, and the audible component has reduced to a hum of varying volume, most pronounced in the presence of female examiners between the ages of 34 and 41. The object briefly returned to its documented blue for 54 minutes and 34 seconds at 1:23 in the morning on the 26th of April, 1986. This was coincident with the discovery of the body of one designated personnel within a Foundation research facility. Ties between that death and the object remain inconclusive. Effects of prolonged exposure have been reported by some handlers as periods of unusual calmness, and by others as recurring waves of melancholy, loss of balance, and intrusive thoughts of self-destruction, though such episodes have not exceeded 11 days in duration. The object reacted to the presence of one further subject on the 12th of March, 1993, by turning light violet for no more than 2 minutes and 9 seconds. The effects of this reaction remain unknown. Documents pertaining to the original recovery were destroyed in a fire at a research facility on the 9th of December, 1989. Following the loss of the original procedures, a containment test, designated T1, was initiated to determine why mirrors specifically were required to hold the object inert. The disk was first placed upon a retail-grade mirror set within a brass frame. It rested without activity. This single observation removed any need for costly silver-lined or wooden containment systems. When set instead upon a standard wooden table, the disk turned upright and began to roll across the surface in one direction, completing a U-turn at the edge, then traversing back, tracing an oval path that it repeated without pause. A mirror brought into the vicinity drew it immediately. The object rolled toward the mirror and laid itself flat against the glass, sliding to the center. Despite the grainy texture of the stone, no mark was left upon the mirror's surface. With two mirrors placed at opposite ends of the table, the disk gravitated to the nearer of the two, showing no preference for type or quality, only for proximity. When a mirror was held by a person and moved about the room, the disk followed at increasing speed, reaching a maximum velocity that has since been redacted. At no recorded velocity did its impact damage either object. The final observation of the containment test was accidental, arising from a brief altercation between staff regarding the settlement of a lunch tab. One researcher, holding the disk, was tripped by another and fell against a mirror mounted nearby. The disk was driven against the reflective surface while still in his grasp. As a result of this unintended demonstration, it was established that a living person holding SCP-093 and placing it against a mirror will in fact pass through the mirror. Containment testing was discontinued at this point, the requirement of a mirror for rest having been confirmed. Authorization was granted for a second series of tests, designated T2, to investigate the destinations reached through such passage. Subjects were to wear a Class 3 buckle harness anchored to a tension pulley system permitting roughly 300 meters of movement, with spools available to extend that distance if required. Each subject was issued a light source, water, rations, a firearm to be handed across only after entry, and a field knife concealed within the kit, which the subject was expected to discover unaided. A wired camera was mounted on the shoulder or head, wireless feeds having shown unreliable behavior in untested color states. The color of the disk was to be recorded at each test, alongside the documented history of the subject, in order to assess the link between the object's hue and the guilt carried by the holder. The first documented passage is the blue test. The subject was a male of 34 years and strong build, with a history of violence on record. The subject was cooperative throughout preparation. He held the disk, which emitted a blue color, and stepped into the provided mirror. Technicians stationed outside the frame observed that the mirror retained a true reflection of the room until the subject had passed entirely through, at which point the surface shifted to display an outdoor landscape heavily tinged in blue. The camera flickered to life and showed lowland plains stretching in every direction, ordinary grass and weeds bending in a soft breeze, every shade of the scene overlaid with the same persistent blue. No trees were visible. No living thing moved within the frame. The subject panned the camera in a slow arc and reported no landmarks. He then proceeded forward as instructed. After approximately 500 steps, a patch of barren ground became visible ahead. As he approached, the grass at the edge of this patch could be seen to be dying. 300 further steps brought him to the lip of a hole dug into the earth using tools whose origin could not be determined. The pulley system was engaged, and the camera registered a faint shudder. The subject was instructed to descend. After mild protest, he complied. No ladder or rope was present within the hole. He relied entirely on his own grip and on the tension of the cable to slow his descent. Approximately 100 meters of cable were paid out before he reached the bottom. The light source from the field kit was activated 50 meters down as exterior light grew unreliable. Sweeping the beam revealed only bare dirt, even at the floor of the shaft. The subject moved forward. When asked about the blue tinge of the landscape above, he expressed confusion, stating that from his perspective there had been no such tinge and never was. Light became visible further down the passage. 150 meters of cable had been used. Off camera, the sound of the firearm being readied was recorded. When questioned, the subject described the action as justified precaution and continued onward. The walls of the tunnel changed from bare earth to a poured concrete enclosure. The subject reported a stench. The distant light proved to be a row of ceiling fixtures, of which less than a quarter were broken while the rest still functioned. 6 doors lined the corridor, 3 to each side, with a 7th door at the far end half blocked by what appeared to be the rusted remains of generic metal shelving of the type used in retail stores. This debris suggested prior human presence. The subject was requested to try the doors in whatever order he chose. The first on the right was locked. The second, unlocked, would not move, blocked from the far side. The third matched the first. Crossing the corridor, he found that the third door on the opposite side opened freely, and light from within was bright enough that he switched off his lamp. The room beyond was bare. The walls, however, were heavily soiled. The subject stated that the material on them was not dirt. He could not identify it. It resembled melted plastic, brown rather than black in color. He closed the door. The second door on the left side had no handle. The opening where one had been was plugged with unknown material. The frames of all the doors were fitted in such a way that nothing could be seen through them at any angle, even at the ground. The first door on the left was locked, but a fragment of the key remained jammed in the lock, broken off at the bow. With some effort, the subject manipulated the broken key and forced the door open. He immediately began to cough, again citing the stench. Within, the walls and floor were clean, but the ceiling was coated in the same strange brown residue as the earlier room. A makeshift cot of aged blankets and a pillow occupied one corner. A wooden crate held boxes of what had once been food, the writing on which appeared as illegible squiggles on the recorded feed, though the subject stated plainly that they read simply cereal. A second crate contained empty, dried-out water bottles. A closed book lay beside the cot, bearing no title or mark. Articles had been clipped to the walls, but the language upon them could not be read. The subject was asked to remove them. All but one crumbled to fragments at his touch. The intact piece was sealed in a sample container. He was then asked to investigate the book. As he moved toward it, the audio of the feed broke into a high-pitched screech like grinding metal that dominated all communication for 3.5 seconds. The subject had not yet touched the book. When the noise ceased, he asked Control to repeat their last instruction. Control had issued none. Their headsets had been removed against the noise. The subject was advised to leave the room. He noted that the door had begun, of its own accord, to swing slowly shut. He was told to leave it as it was and to investigate the second door on the right. Careful review of the next 10 seconds of recording reveals, as the camera pans, a figure at the far end of the corridor where the 7th blocked door stands. The door is open just wide enough for a face to be visible through the crack. No details can be discerned. It closes again in silence. The subject, unaware, pushed at the second door on the right. After repeated impacts, it gave enough to admit a partial view. A board hung within, more clippings affixed to it. The top of one of the cereal boxes lay on the floor. A hand was also visible, palm upturned, its owner out of frame. The subject closed the door, passed the sealed 7th door without incident, and, finding nowhere further to explore, was recalled. He offered no protest, complaining only of the worsening stench. As he began the return ascent, Control reported a sudden surge of cable, an additional 100 meters drawn through the pulley before the line went briefly slack and then snapped tight again. The subject denied climbing, stating that he was being drawn upward. He was instructed to ready the firearm. Upon emerging at the surface, he reported no change to the landscape. He began to follow the cable back toward the mirror. After approximately 900 steps, he asked how much line he had used and noted, with growing concern, that the cable now lay along a path that bent through a 90-degree angle, departing from a single point in the open ground. He was asked to pan the camera in a full, slow circle. Behind him, the recording captured 37 countable figures standing in silence upon the plain. Their features could not be identified. They alone, of all things visible, did not carry the blue tinge of the landscape. Panic was noted in the control room. The subject, however, reported only the angled cable. He tugged his end. It remained taut. Control engaged the pulley. Slack reeled in rapidly. Movement of disturbed grass could be followed down the angled portion of the cable until the line met resistance and gave a sharp twang as it recoiled. More slack was then allowed back, before once again being suddenly returned. Control demanded that the subject follow the cable's path back. Screams entered the audio. 5 shots were fired at something not within the camera's frame. Control observed the subject reappear at the point of origin, while the camera showed the cable terminating in a single point, floating in empty air. As he passed through that point, all remaining cable returned to the pulley, and the camera filmed only the floor. The mirror required approximately 5 seconds to resolve back into a true reflection. The disc remained blue for 1 further hour after recovery. A vile-smelling fluid was found on the subject's clothing around his hands when the firearm was retrieved. It dried quickly and was deemed insufficient for study. Control personnel monitoring the mirror reported having seen, in those final seconds, a humanoid form crawling along the ground on the far side, approximately 50 times the size of a person, its face entirely featureless and its arms strikingly short, dragging itself toward the surface before the reflection returned. At least one observer noted that the smooth, featureless face appeared to bear marks consistent with having been shot. The recovered field kit contained a single newspaper clipping, the contents of which have been classified. The next test in the series is designated the green test.